Going a week without a dogfight, like a lot of fleet guys do, and then going that same week and having 15 or 20 dogfights, it's totally different when you get there. Probably my best moment was not only getting the orders to Top Gun, but getting there and being saturated in that kind of environment and realizing that there's no other place I'd rather be than right here, right now. So every morning I woke up and went to Top Gun, I was the happiest guy on earth.
Hello and welcome to the Fighter Pilot Podcast. I am your host, Vincent Aiello, callsign Jello, and I am excited because today I have one of my childhood heroes here at the Circle Air Group Studios at Gillespie Field in San Diego, California. It's Heatley. Heater, welcome, and I love you.
Thanks, Jello. Good to be here. I love you and your broadcast.
Well, thank you. No, this show's been a lot of fun, and it's only because of folks like you that take the time to come and be on it and share your experiences. And man, so I'll tell you what, like I said, you're like a childhood hero to me. I didn't even write an outline because I just thought I would just sit here and like bubble my lip a little bit or something. But I will say this, you have been on a lot of other shows, including, Tall Tales with Taco Bell, our C-130 Marine friend. You've also been on Ward Carroll's channel, and that one was a little more recently. And so I think listeners, viewers can go reference those, and we can just bounce all over the place today, wherever the conversation takes us.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And let me see if I can get this right? You help me out. So, photojournalism major in Michigan.
Missouri.
It starts with an M, you know.
Yeah.
California kid, I got close with the M. Joined the Navy, got a pilot slot, went and flew, first T-34Bs, T-2s, and 8 TA-4Js. And I remember that because I'm very similar a couple decades later, but I was the T-34C. And then F-4s, and then went through Top Gun in the old style between deployments, did a bunch of deployments. As part of being Top Gun, you got a chance to go play in places in Las Vegas we weren't allowed to talk about for the longest time. And then you came back, and I'm going to skip some stuff, but you found your way to the F-14. You took a camera along with you a lot of the way and made a book at some point. And some of those pictures turned into someone taking notice that then helped with a movie that we all know and love. And let's see, you had a career that lasted till 2000. You ended up in the sequel to that movie that came out just a couple years ago. Oh, and a athlete, baseball player, all-around great American. I think we're done here. I mean, what...
Yeah, almost, except for your sound panels, because
yes.
I know everybody brings you patches, and I said even on Facebook I was going to try to bring you 2 patches you hadn't seen before.
Okay.
So this first one, you mentioned Las Vegas, that's the 4477th Red Eagles.
Okay.
We started as a flight, so it was TEF, and then we became a squadron as we got larger and got more MiG-23s and other things. So I figured I'd do an eagle, stars and bars, a white star instead of Russian red star, but silver for the MiGs. And
that's awesome.
That red eagle patch.
Thank you.
And this one is really rare. Doesn't even have the name on it. It was so secret for so long. This comes from Area 51. And these are the red hats from the 6513th. Now, they're a bunch of test pilots. So what was cool about being there and learning to fly the MiGs is the test pilot way of doing things is they give you a couple pieces of paper with some notes, and then you go fly an airplane you've never flown before, and you have to come back with all the V1, V2, where it stalls, corner speed, acceleration, every number you can think of, you bring back on your knee board and say, this is what that airplane does. So instead of doing it like the RAG or the training squadron, it was like, there's your MiG-17, get in it. And for the 17, it had air brakes, like right here. So you grab the handle, hit the air brake, and then you had to hit the rudder to put that brake on. So we don't have airplanes like that. And so when anyone was flying the MiG-17 for the first time, they'd all come out of the hangars because it was kind of like when you first drove a boat. You'd put the left brake on so you could turn, and it wouldn't turn because the brake's on. So you put more power, and then the airplane starts turning like crazy, and you're and then you put the right brake on, and it goes back this way. Eventually, you taxi back into the hangar door, have to shut it down. Everybody's laughing and rolling, and you have to get tugged out to the back of the where you started, and then try it all over again. So luckily, I went to school on those guys. I happened to watch somebody do that, so I was very judicious in my braking, and I didn't have to shut down and restart. But that was the whole attitude there on all the MiGs that we flew.
Very cool. Well, as the former threat aircraft subject matter expert at Top Gun, these are amazing, and as were your experiences. What models did you fly? By the time I was lecturing in 2001-ish, our big threats were MiG-21, 23, 25, and Su-27. There were other threat aircraft out there, but those were a good proxy for them. Which ones did you fly?
Yeah, back for us, the 17, 21, 23 were the big threats.
And were you current in all three?
No, I tried to avoid the flogger. I didn't want to fly that.
Why is that?
Well, for one thing, it couldn't turn. It was really fast. And when you went up, you could see the curvature of the earth. But then when you came back down to fight, you just couldn't turn. You just stick the wings at 45 and try to do something. But it sure could accelerate. You can get out and get back into the fight. But the main problem was it was a hangar queen. So the guys that got stuck flying that were getting 1 or 2 hops a week. I was getting 3 or 4 hops a day.
A day?
A day.
Sometimes
these like 5.
0.5s, or how short were they?
The 17 was 17 to 18 minutes of flight. And the 21 was anywhere from 22 to 26 minutes. Because in Tonopah, you took off in burner, climbed to altitude, screamed into the intercept, fight's on. Usually you fought till you're out of gas and dropped right back into the field, and then the fighters went home. So, 18 minutes of full burner.
Yeah. It always took me a couple minutes just to get warmed up. I guess by the second or third or fourth flight of the day, you were pretty well warmed up and proficient. But so when you went to fly that was, I guess, what we'd call your first shore duty, arguably, right? So you had gone to help me with the squadrons. What was your first F4 squadron?
74, B Devilers.
VF-74. So as part of that, you went to Top Gun and what used to be called the power projection, stayed at VF-74.
Yeah, because I did one cruise, go to Top Gun at 75, and then come back. And the old way to do it was now you sort of share everything you learned in every brief and debrief and help the whole squadron get to the next level.
So then when it's time for your shore duty, you get selected to go put on the light blue T-shirt of the Top Gun Bros, as they are called. And then as part of that, you went to go have an opportunity to do this.
Yeah, and I'm sorry it went away. You mentioned the light blue T-shirt, and that's all that's left. And I've been to a few graduations in Fallon the last couple of years. But I really like the fact that we had sort of a Blue Angel flight suit. So when we walked anywhere on the base or in any other base, everybody could say, there's a Top Gun instructor. It was really nice. Yeah. And I think after Tailhook, they said, these guys are getting too much press. And they said, no more flight suits. Yeah. And they had to try real hard to stick to the blue T-shirt.
That was part of the amalgamation up in Fallon and becoming, you're not your own command anymore. You're part of NSOC, now NAUTIC. And they fought that, it sounds like to me, until they finally won it. And now every department at NAUTIC has a different colored shirt. So
cool.
You've got the light blue for the Top Gun. You've got, I'm not going to remember them all, but there's, like a eggplant purple. There's red for the Seawolf guys. There's a bunch of different colors. So it's almost like the jerseys on the aircraft carrier.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, getting back to the MiGs that you flew. So in other words, you obviously weren't a new pilot at the time. You'd flown a lot of BFM. Did flying different aircraft like that, and particularly flying against the fighters that you were maybe used to, or Air Force fighters as well, what did that do to your understanding and awareness of dogfighting, 1v1, BFM, ACM. We're going to use all these terms interchangeably,
Sure.
but did that help you take it to a new level?
It really did. And it sounds complicated and hard, but it's no different than getting a car at an airport. I mean, sometimes it's a Hyundai, sometimes it's a Ford, and sometimes there's little differences.
You're talking about a rental car?
Yeah, you just get in and you drive away.
Yeah, right.
And you know how to work the radio and the nav system and everything else. And so they all had different attributes, and you had to fight them all differently. And that's what I liked about it. And you being a generation behind, you had a lot of information in the HUD. So I had steam gauges, not much of a HUD in anything till I got into the F-14, and even that wasn't good for dogfighting. So what was interesting, and it helped me a lot, I knew all the corner speeds of every airplane. And then I knew the corner speeds if they had tanks, missiles, or full bag of gas. So I could say, all right, I'm going to take my F-4J with a big centerline tank, and when I'm at 6.5 Gs, which is the limit, I'm going to be 15 degrees below the horizon. So when I'm pulling hard in those fights, if I'm 15 degrees below the horizon, I'm full burner, maintaining 450 and maintaining my best turn rate and radius. So every airplane was a little different. The F-5 could go like 8 degrees below the horizon. The A4 could go 5 degrees. And then I got in the F-15 and I could actually turn at 7.3 Gs in a 15-degree climb. And I was thinking, holy mackerel. And everybody else that I flew with, you had to go downhill to maintain your knots. And then I flew a little in the F-16N, and I could do 9 Gs and climb. The difference was I could look out, keep track of the bogey or the bogeys, and my nose is always relative to the horizon, so I could always max perform my airplane before I took it vertical or continued on with a rate fight from the inside.
So the point of whatever rental car you get in, and you just take a second and get familiar with it, and then off you go, is whatever airplane you're in might have a slightly different pitch in order for you to maintain the G or the speed or whatever it is you want. And just for fun, so I should have brought some models, darn it. But if we're going to talk BFM today, which we've really not done on the show before, I guess we'll just have to use good old fighter pilot hands.
Yep.
But corner speed. Remind me, and let's see if I could take a stab at this. This is the speed. It varies by aircraft and probably with, like you said, with what you're carrying and conditions. But it's the speed at which you can max perform the limit of the Gs, and you even talked about different for the different aircraft, and still get, I think, was it the minimum radius or the maximum rate? Or
the maximum G. So if you have a 6.5 G airplane and your max G is 350, say in the F-14, if you're going 400, you can pull 6.5 Gs, but that extra 50 knots gives you extra turn radius, and your rate's not as good. Obviously, if you were supersonic,
right,
really huge radius.
We call that
so
arcing.
you're sitting there doing 6.5 Gs thinking you're max performing, but you're not unless you're at the corner speed.
Okay.
That's why I used different speeds. The F-14 varied. I could start at 360 with a heavy airplane, and that would be my corner speed. And that was also about 15 degrees below. But then as I got lighter, or if I didn't have tanks and missiles, then that would be about 330 for a corner speed, and I didn't have to go below 10 degrees below the horizon. So I could keep at max G, max airspeed, and all the pressure on the bogey I needed without ever looking in.
And I just think once in a while, it's funny to stop and think about what you as a pilot and a human were able to do in that moment. In other words, you're in this dynamic environment, your body's under tremendous strain, and yet you're recalling all these concepts while also assessing what the other guy's doing. And maybe there's not only just one other guy, there might be others. So where was he last time I looked? Because I have a little bit more time, but I know I need this speed, this pitch, and then I can employ this weapon. I've said it before on the show. I mean, I put being a fighter pilot up with doctors and lawyers and such, as the song goes, because there's really a lot to know, and it's in critical moments where there's a lot happening all at once.
Yeah, I think the difference is in the fleet, you hardly get to fight. So they don't have a lot of gas. Turnaround time is dependent on how much you fly. Obviously, you fly more if you're closer to cruise, but you don't get a lot of ACM hops. And so fighting a Top Gun bro who's flying 2 or 3 a day or 5 or 6 like I was, it's so different. And you're right, it's like a pro. It's like anyone who gets 10,000 hours into anything, you become an expert. So here these guys are, they don't even remember what side they started on for the debrief. They don't remember what happened. It's just a jumble. And you and I are up there, and we have a little bit on our knee board, how we started altitude airspeed. But in the middle of the fight, we'll pull up and we'll go, okay, I'm going to go up here a couple seconds. I'll reach down and there's a little climb. He's making a descent. I'm hitting 31,000 feet. I'm coming over 200 knots, and then back in the fight. So every 20 seconds in the fight, you're actually writing down a memory peg so you can debrief the entire flight. And I'll tell you who was shocked by this was the Germans. They just were first to the blackboard. This is how it went. Everyone would disagree, but if you were first, that was it. So when I went to teach them the Top Gun syllabus over a month, they were shocked that anybody could take like a 1v1v1v1, 4 aircraft, and then come back, put everybody on the board, and show everybody's first move, then their second move, and then say, and this is what you were thinking here, because you saw this and this and this. And he's like, yeah, that's right. And that's why I bugged out, so I could come back in. And I said, yeah. And then, as always in a multiplane, the first guy who gets slow is the first guy who gets shot. And always the guy who lined up to get that shot is the next guy to get shot. And we learned that because I doubt if you did this at Fallon, but in our 5-week syllabus at the end, we had a 50-plane, multi-plane engagement.
Wow.
So we invite the whole base for a brief, 3-hour flight, meet over San Clemente or someplace in the Papa area, and everyone gets vectored in, and it's everyone against everyone else. The reserves, the adversary aircraft, all the visitors that were there, some flew in for it, and you'd have 50 planes arcing around in a 5-mile bubble. And what I noticed there that I kind of changed my fighting style afterwards is that, yep, everybody can see that guy that got real slow trying to get the first fight and he ran out of energy. And you go, okay, that guy's going to get dead any second now. Who's going to get him? And then you see a guy rolling in on him and you go, okay, that's the next kill. And sure enough, they kill that guy, then that guy's dead, and everybody else is like, okay, I better be careful. And they were just great learning environments, and everyone came back and debriefed.
Wow. How do they keep that
they
safe, though? I mean, I've got to think that this went the way of the dodo bird, because surely at some point 2 people banged into each other with that many in a small piece of sky.
No, and we never really even had that much of a close call. And
really?
I think part of it was it was a 3-hour period. If we put all 50 airplanes in the first 20 minutes, yeah, it would have been a disaster. but we were pumping them in. So in an overlap, you might get 40 total airplanes because, there was 12 or 15 going out at first, and then more people just kept adding till the end of the period.
If you got shot, could you go out and touch home plate and get safe and come back alive again?
You did an aileron roll, acknowledge you were dead. You had to drive out for a certain amount of seconds, do a 180, and re-enter the fight. So some people got to get killed 3 times, and that was really, really bad.
It's like 5 times you could be like a negative ace kind of thing. But
yeah.
All right, but hold on. Let's talk about dogfighting, because in the earliest days, right, you had 2 airplanes, biplanes and triplanes at the very earliest days, and all they had were guns. And in fact, they had these weird contraptions to shoot them through the propellers, which still boggles my mind. But the idea was you could shoot each other really in almost any aspect, but the most accurate and the most effective was to get behind and have a tracking shot, maybe we would call it, right?
Right.
And that was even true, I would say, through World War II and maybe Korea. But then, of course, you have jet aircraft, you have missiles and all that. Well, first off, let's talk about some of those concepts, right? Because if you two aircraft meet right here, it's not just magically that, except in Hollywood, where one ends up right behind the other. But you kind of hinted at it earlier. You have rate fight, radius fight. You can manage your energy and altitude and all those things. What are some general concepts without a whiteboard or models here that are relevant to if you and I meet like this and you want to get like this, what are you going to try to do?
Right. First, you have to realize that many of the aces, fact, Eric Hartman, I think, 352 kills.
Right.
I think he said 351 of them never knew that he was there. So the whole thing about dogfighting and getting in the saddle and gunning his brains out, that wasn't the way a lot of those guys did it. They just snuck up into the blind cone and then hosed the hell out of them till they died. And the other guys would, if they saw a fight, they would either try to exit and then re-enter in better terms, or if they got into a dogfight, then they had to know what we learned at Top Gun and why Top Gun came about, because everybody unlearned it for Vietnam, and they had to relearn it, which is what we'll be talking about all weekend. Did you tell them we're going to the 55th?
No, by the time this comes out, it'll be history. But
yeah, that'll be history. But we'll be there this afternoon, tomorrow, and the next day.
Saturday, yeah. You're in town for Top Gun's 55th anniversary. And
I can't wait to see all the old bros. When I was a student, all the guys that started originally were still instructing there. And so I got to meet all of them. And then a year and a half later, I was back as an instructor, and all those people are there. So
yeah.
But anyway, back to what they learned at Top Gun in World War I and II. They figured this out with the aggressors, because I had to fly with the 64th and 65th, and they had film in their F-5s. So Top Gun had film in their F-5s for the gun det, but we never debriefed with it. We were good enough at debriefing, so it didn't matter. But in the F-5, in Nellis, on any given mission, you had 24 frames in 1 second, right? So you could see when your gun was squeezed, and if you didn't have 24 pipper on the airplane 1 second, it could go to the nose, tail, wings. As long as it was a full second, you got a kill. If it was 23 frames, you didn't get a kill, and you were looked at badly for knocking that guy out of the fight. And then the other thing was, if you could keep the pipper on 12 seconds on the fuselage, that was a kill. So half a second on the fuselage was a kill. And they learned that in World War I and II because people came back with lots of bullet holes. So just because you were spraying the guy in front of you didn't mean you were going to get a kill. So that's sort of the correction that they made. And I thought that was really, really good, because you'd be in a debrief and they'd look at it, slow it down, and you'd see the poor guy that got shot. You go, you only have 9 frames on the fuselage. And I mean, they treated him like they're treating Christy Nome now for shooting her dog. So that was really bad. So people were very conservative, and they'd always have a valid kill.
Well, and shot validity is what you're talking about here, because in real life, right, if you and I are adversaries and we're fighting to the death, one of us is going to go down in flames, and we have obviously that feedback. But in training, we're not shooting real bullets, real missiles. So we have to take what we know about our systems and say, okay, we think this is going to be, quote, a valid shot, is this many frames of the trigger pulled, the pipper on in this part of the airplane, or this many total frames. And so that's just our way of making sure we get the most out of our training. But anyway, getting back to BFM concepts in general, one way you talked about early on is the best way, arguably, is if the guy doesn't know you're there, sneak up behind him, hose him down, and that's a kill for the books. But if you both know you're there, and of course in training, we train to this, you could have a neutral merge, as we call it, like 2 cars passing on the freeway or highway maybe. Or you could have a perch setup where maybe I'm trying to sneak up on you, but at the last second you do detect me. So maybe you're defensive, I'm offensive, and you're going to break, and I'm going to try to stay offensive. You're going to try to neutralize me. And in the course of that, we have these different concepts of rate and radius that you talked about before. And the idea there is, well, what do I know about my aircraft? What do I know about yours? Maybe I know that yours can fly a smaller radius, but it loses all its energy. So I might want to do a rate fight. So again, getting back to sort of one of my crusades on the Fighter Pilot podcast is you have to know your aircraft. You have to know the other guy's aircraft. You have to know your conditions for the day and your energy state in that moment and what's the best thing to do. And in your case, for a time, you had to do that for more than one airplane in a given day. You might fly different aircraft.
Right. Yeah. Because we would fight in one day easily. You could fight the T-38, the F-5, the A-4, MiG-21, MiG-17. Not everybody, just
Right.
a few lucky people like me.
What was the most quals you ever had at once?
One day I got 9 sorties in 7 different airplanes. The next day I got 7 sorties. I had 16 sorties in 2 days. But that counted the Cessna twin engine that we flew up, and it counted an S2 Stoof that VX4 brought in that they taught me to fly, and all the others were fighters.
Yeah. You were like a test pilot without the 6 months of painful training.
Yeah, that was nice. I'm glad I didn't have to go through the training. I just flew. And you got to remember, the MiG 17 had no boosted elevator. So it was biceps power. And you could fly faster than you could pull Gs. I mean, you get to 400 knots, you're lucky if you can get 4.5 Gs. And 450, 4 Gs at the most.
I mean, this was an early 50s fighter, right?
Yeah,
Soviet Union. So to be fair, it was very basic, brand new jet. It was only one removed from the MiG-15.
Rudder just flopping in the wind and boosted ailerons, but not very high boost. They had a really slow turn rate. So besides the steam gauges, manual. Even the MiG-21 had a manual rudder. And I went Mach 2 in that thing.
Hopefully at Mach 2 you're not using a lot of rudder, generally speaking.
No, but when you get back at certain speeds that you fly a lot at, sometimes there's like a twist in the airplane and you need to keep just a touch on there. And so we would tell the maintenance guys, and they would take a pliers and go to the metal on the rudder. And you probably did that in some of your models or your brother's RC planes.
Absolutely,
A little
you had to be careful.
Trim tab.
Balsa wood, though. That was not as forgiving as metal.
There you go. Yeah.
I know I'm all over the map here, but I just thought of a question while you were talking about that. We're quick to attribute our renewed success, if you will, in Vietnam to Top Gun. But I wonder how much of it do you think is really attributable to the fact that we had these programs in the desert where American pilots were able to see, no kidding, Russian or Soviet, I don't know what to call it, but, Soviet fighters. Because as you talked about in your video with Ward Carroll, you see it, you're like, holy cow, right? And you can almost tell what the other guy's doing, the buck fever he's getting, because all of a sudden he's not maneuvering anymore, right? You can only do one thing when you're on stem power. And so I wonder do you think Top Gun, I'm not saying it didn't do a good job teaching pilots, but I wonder how much of it was maybe the fact that as part of Top Gun, they were also getting a chance to go see guys like you in the desert.
That had to have a lot to do with it because there's a famous tape of a huge battle over Vietnam. The Whoopi, look at the MiGs. Remember that tape?
Oh, yeah, I've heard that one. Yeah.
Yeah, the guy is like 10 octaves up. Whoopi, look at the MiGs in the middle of a fight. And he eventually gets shot down. He had that, oh my God, there's actual real MiGs out here. So what you're saying is definitely at least half of it. We exposed them. We just didn't fight. We'd get right next to them, slow up so they could see how slow we could go. We'd have them go underneath, all around, really get a good look, and say, okay, now you're not magical anymore. You're just another airplane that happens to be silver, and now let's fight. And even there, the first couple of engagements, the fleet almost always lost, partly because they were all keyed up and they didn't do everything right, and partly because they would lose sight because they were so aggressive. They would over G and then we were hard to see, so they'd lose sight. So I think it was both. People learned how to handle their airplanes again in a fight, but they got to see the MiGs. So once they saw the MiGs, it was just down to, okay, how am I going to kill you? And there wasn't any of that, gee whiz, holy crap,
Yeah.
type of thing going on. So I think you hit on a point that not a lot of people talk about. It was the exposures that did it. And that's why this squadron, the 4477th, was so important. We brought everybody we could to get exposed to those things, usually 3 hops each.
Yeah. I suppose it's a little bit like maybe bumping into a celebrity if you're walking down the street in LA
Exactly.
or something, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
But, in fact, here's an example. So I used to ride motorcycles on the track with my brother, like Laguna Seca up in Monterey. And one time we shared the track, not at the same time, but with some cars that were there. So they'd have a session, we'd have a session on our motorcycles. And Patrick Dempsey, the actor, was there, like right in the middle of his Grey's Anatomy thing. And he was just like another driver in the paddock. So at first we're all like, whoa, that's him. Yeah, he really is a good looking dude. But then after a while, I was like, oh yeah, he's just going to go do his session. We're going to do ours. And at the end of the day, we had a bunch of refreshments and he came and sat around with us. And it was just like, oh, he's a normal dude now. But when you first see him, like, oh, here's somebody from TV or movies.
Right. So, that is actually a perfect analogy. And that's happened to me and a lot of people. You won't even talk to them or go up to them the first time. But after you've had a beer with them or told some stories, it's just like another bud. And that's the same way with the MiGs. Yeah. That's a really good point.
Yeah. That exposure, though, I have to think, again, all those airplanes you flew, what you saw from the other aircraft, just trying to, I don't know if we need a theme for this discussion, but kind of bringing it back to BFM, there's nothing like experience. And so you had a chance to not just do the same thing over and over and over, but to see it from so many different perspectives, both in the aircraft that you were in and other aircraft. Kind of like I wasn't in an LSO. Were you in LSO battles? No. But I'm told like they would sit out there and wave so many passes that after a while they got good at it just from watching it.
Right.
So I have to think for you as well, all that exposure. And it's not like you quit doing it after you left the desert. You went on and kept flying in other aircraft. So it must have made you, dare I say, King Kong in a dogfight?
Yeah, I felt like I knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
And people were in trouble if they wanted to fight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and being able to come back and accurately debrief what happened, I think is a big part of it because that's where the learning takes place.
Yeah. And one of my lectures at Top Gun was briefing and debriefing. And I really took a lot of interest in that because the ready room doesn't really see what everybody's doing out in the air, but they see a brief and debrief.
Yeah.
And if you have a very professional brief and debrief, they realize, okay, he's up his game.
Yeah.
And then everybody else tries to up their game, and that translates to the flying and the fighting too. So that's the whole Top Gun effect. It just elevates everybody.
Well, and we've talked about it with other episodes here on this show, but I really still believe firmly that briefing and debriefing is, number one, briefing is what is going to allow you to have success. Do we know what we're out there to do? Do we have some contingency plans in place if it doesn't go well? And does everyone know their role? So then you can go out and do it. But then when you get back and you debrief it, that's really where the learning takes place.
Yes.
So that if for whatever reason you don't pass or you don't succeed, then you've studied it, you've learned what can I do different next time. And if you have the opportunity to go out and do it, you can now execute correctly, and hence you've learned how to do it better. So I know for me, Heater, I was on the staff. Well, first off, I was going through the course as a student, and I was just terrible at defensive BFM. So again, that's for everyone else. That's where you start, where the other guy has an advantage, and you have to hold them off. And that one's harder because you're looking over your shoulder the whole time, but you have to look inside for airspeeds and headings for the debrief and what your energy is and all that. And one of the instructors, Sprout Emmons, he goes, Jello, you're just not getting it, but it's okay. We'll work on you when you get to the staff. So they moved me on. But when I got to the staff, it still took 10 tries to pass to the standard of the Top Gun instructor, which is both a compliment to them and a slam on me because I just wasn't that good. But to be fair, I would just get close and then the jets wouldn't be available and I'd lose that proficiency. But the point being is that they really wanted you, number one, to be able to understand it, number two, execute it, and number three, come back and explain why it did or didn't go well to the point where now you can transfer that to the other person you're flying with, particularly if it's a student, so that they get that light bulb moment.
Right. Yeah, I learned one thing accidentally. We're coming back from the Papa Ranges southwest of San Diego, and my wingman's joining up, and he realizes he has another 1,000 pounds he could fight with. I'm bingo. I have no gas. So he goes, I got some for a quickie, and he starts moving out to combat spread, and I'm not going to say no. And so he's out there, and I'm saying, I can't use any power. In fact, I'm going to idle. That's all I can do. And I'll give him a couple turns and see what happens. So I knew F5. So I knew if he went vertical, I was toast because I'm at idle. So what happened was, he yells, "Fight's on." I turn in as hard as I can at idle, which gives me a really min turn rate.
Yeah.
He turns in, he's burner. So he's arcing a little bit, and I reverse inside of him. So by the time we're at the pass, I have 90 degrees on him at idle. And instead of doing like leveling his wings and going up and say, if you gave away all that energy already, I'm going vertical.
Yeah.
He didn't. He just stayed down, nose low, where I could keep pulling until I was shooting him. And then he tried to pull even harder, and I told him in the debrief, all you did is make your holes more symmetrical, because when you were like this and I was gunning you, that's one thing, but if you go like that and you don't come out of plane, with a latch stitch maneuver, you're just going to get shot, rounder holes. And so that really made me realize, oh my gosh, if you're not using your nose right, you're not really in the fight. And if you could beat somebody at idle because he basically flew in front of you the whole time, that was something that stuck with me from that point on. I think that was in 77.
Wow.
So I used that my whole career.
Yeah.
It really
well,
helped.
Plus he was helping make himself a larger target by closing the gap between the two.
Exactly.
And that was another one of Eric Hartman's tenets, was shoot big targets.
Yeah.
Right? If I'm trying to hit an animal with a rifle at a long distance, you got to really aim carefully if you're a hunter, versus if you can sneak up on them or draw them in.
Right.
Everybody knows that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's cool. Yeah, F5, golly. I still don't know how you kept all those aircraft straight in your head.
I don't know how either, because sometimes people would walk out with the parachute for the F5 and their flight was in an A4. So that's happened to a lot of Top Gun instructors. You're wearing the wrong gear walking to the airplane just out of habit.
Yeah.
But for some reason for me, when I did the pre-flight and then sat in that airplane, it was like that's the only airplane I've ever flown. And everything was where it was supposed to be, and it just felt great. And I never had an issue. But I think it was because I did it so often. If there's a lot of time, just like you get stale, if you don't do ACM for a week, and then you fly, the G's, your head feels different, everything feels different, you're not good. And going a week without a dogfight, like a lot of fleet guys do, and then going that same week and having 15 or 20 dogfights, it's totally different when you get there. So,
well, that concept is exactly why, partly why I also sucked, but that was part of the reason I took 10 tries to get through defensive BFM. You talked about, I was thinking of a hydraulic isolation valve. You know how once the landing gear is up, then the hydraulic system says, well, I don't care about the gear anymore until he puts it down, so I'm just going to not send hydraulic pressure to the landing gear. Sounds like you had a cerebral version of that. You just isolated the A4 and the F4 and everything else when you jumped in the F5.
I guess so. And the T-38. And
wasn't the T-38 close enough to the F5, but not really? That must have been confusing.
It was a little different, and no slats and then a couple other things.
Yeah.
No gun, but it was so similar that, I probably don't count that. It flew good, fought good.
Yeah.
I liked it. And then that's what we used as a shuttle back and forth to Tonopah.
Yeah. Were all your sorties, this is one thing I don't know about you, training? Or did you put any green ink, as we call it in the Navy, in your logbook anywhere?
I missed the big show. We were there for...
Talking about 91?
Right before Desert Thunder. So our battle group was the only battle group there. The Air Force got into Riyadh, but ordnance logistics was screwed up, so they had no weapons. So Schwarzkopf said, I'm going to come out to the carrier. And we did a big air demo for him. And in fact, Slapshot Carter, had him on yet?
No, I haven't, but I know
Admiral
the name.
Carter, now president of Ohio State.
All right.
He was in my back seat. So if this is the carrier, Schwarzkopf and his entourage and about 3,000 people are on the flight deck. And we're going to drop bombs. We're going to shoot the spar with the gun.
That's the thing we drag behind the boat.
Yeah, but the show is going to start on the dot with the supersonic pass. So we're behind the boat, and all Slapshot's saying is speed and altitude. So he's like 50 feet, 1.0, 55, 1.1. And I think by the time I hit the deck, I wanted to be 60 feet at the round down. So I'm eyeball level with his, my cockpit is eyeball level with Schwarzkopf's eyes. And I literally, even though I'm flying faster than a bullet, I could see him because he was so visible and the entourage was so different. And he was dead center on that angle deck by the catwalk looking. So we come and I hit it almost 1.2, 60 feet in about an 85-degree angle of a bank, and it's quiet. So all he's seeing is this quiet airplane going faster than a bullet. I roll wings level and yank it straight up and leave 2 huge vortices in the water. And as I'm pulling up right here, the guy said the wave caught up. Boom! I mean, 22 decks below, and I'm up doing aileron rolls into the sky, and then the rest of the show starts. He was really impressed by that. He liked that. So from that point on, we were doing these strange missions. I can't remember if I talked about it with Mooch or Taco, the only other 2 shows I did. But we went, and Slapshot helped design this. So we would go from the I.O. on the carrier, because they didn't want the Iranians trying to pick us off in the Gulf. So we launched from the I.O.
Indian Ocean,
tank overhead, fly over Oman, a couple other countries, hit UAE. UAE had 135s overhead. We'd all top off in the 135s, go further north toward Kuwait. A Marine 130 would come out. We'd plug the 130, get more gas, and then we would lock up the Mirages and the MiGs over Kuwait. And the rule was, if you're going to shoot them, they better splash in the water. If they splash feet dry, court-martial.
What time of year is this, by the way? Like right after?
A few months before the war.
So fall of 90.
Yeah, so
okay,
we're planning it, and it was called Desert Thunder.
All right.
And when we turned it over to the battle group that came in when we left, they modified it a little and changed it to Desert Storm. But every day for weeks, we were having 8.5-hour missions for a fighter pilot.
That's
And finally, they decided it's a little dangerous coming back at night after all that.
Oh, I do remember. Yeah, one of the good ball flyers.
Yeah. And so they moved that back to 4 or 5 hours, which is still better than your typical, 1.5, 1.6 on a carrier.
Yeah.
I mean, it was great. And then you're locking up bad guys, hoping they make a mistake.
Trying to entice them out.
Yeah, so we couldn't get them out. We just played patty cake for 4 hours, and then I'd leave going, I want my MiG. And then we came right back after the war to do Southern Watch. So now I'm an 06, the air ops officer in the battle group, and the admiral says, I want you to stay day and night current in the F-14. Yes, sir. Definitely. I'll do that. And so I thought I was done with my career at 1,064 traps, and I got about 60 more as an 06, flying one time in the TARPs bird VF2 all over Iraq, and then another mission with VF1. So they kept me day and night current for the whole cruise until we had to run down to Mogadishu and take care of that business. And then we went home, and that was the last time I ever flew.
Yeah. Was the squadron happy to have an extra pilot, or did you ever get the sense like, I don't know, I'm not looking for dirt here, but I remember being in squadrons and having to give up the sorties to the staff.
We had enough gas on that cruise because of the war and Southern Watch.
People
a lot of
lacking.
people have to conserve jet fuel.
Yeah.
And so you hardly fly, especially toward the end of the cruise. But we had enough. Then an edict came down, and we had to curtail the flight time. And so the admiral called me in and said, we have to be a good example. He says, you're not going to be able to fly anymore. We were on our way to Perth by then anyway, so it didn't matter.
My final deployment in 2009, I was the Air Wing Operations Officer, and I would like to hope I was an asset to the 2 Super Hornet squadrons, because they'd call like, hey, we have they're all tanker missions. They'd save the good ones, which is fine for the young guys, but I flew a lot of tanker missions, and it kept me, being on the ship and not flying is miserable. So
it is.
Getting out there and flying once in a while is good.
Yep, I loved it.
All right, so no green ink or combat time, as we call it, although contingency time counts.
No, I actually, when we were doing Southern Watch, we didn't realize it at the time, but I think very quickly, retroactively, they said, oh, by the way, all those TARPS missions and sorties over Iraq, those are all green ink in your logbook.
Yeah.
So I had about 20, maybe.
Yeah. I have, I think, 70 missions over Iraq, and I did drop one LGB in 99 when they were getting a little more frisky, but other than that, I don't really count it as combat operations. We were mostly patrolling.
Very disappointing.
Compared to
frustrating.
Other,
I'd give anything for a turn with a bad guy.
Well, what about this? I mean, do all your takeoffs equal your landings, and any emergencies that, how many hours did you end up with?
Probably, let's see, 6,400.
Mostly in
I never logged the 06 time because VF2 thought VF1 had my logbook. And vice versa.
All right, but over 6,000.
Over 6,000, over 1,100 traps.
And a lot of single engine time, which can be its own hazard.
Yeah, I even had a lot of single engine time in the F-14. Several single engine landings.
Is that right?
At night.
My goodness.
Yeah, one I actually welded the one engine shut, and that's not even in the book. So
just because it went from so hot to off?
The turbine blades welded shut. Instead of having airflow going through it, it was like a giant speed brake.
Oh.
At night, no horizon. And remember how the book says never, ever, ever turn into the bad engine? Well, when I turned into the good engine with that speed brake on the left side, it wouldn't turn. I would get like 20 degrees nose down and it would just skid because the engine's acting as a giant speed brake and the bottom engine is keeping the airplane up this way. And so I think the air ops noticed when I started turning into the bad engine, and they're like, either you don't want to do that. And I said, well, I can't turn right. So just a tiny bit, like 5 or 6 degrees down, it would turn because this was a speed brake.
It's like a pivot point.
And this is pushing. Yeah. So it just pushed me right around.
Well, the Tomcat engines were, 6 or 8 feet apart, something like that?
Oh, yeah, real wide.
But F4, they were pretty much next to each other.
Yeah,
F-18,
no problem.
Which we had the same thing in the F-18, but it was sort of not a joke, but like they're right next to each other. So it almost didn't matter if you turned into the bad engine. But all right, so nighttime, that would be like a fail the feather for the prop guys is what you have going on.
Probably.
With your welded engine. And you're bringing that down and no worries?
No, and I think everybody had something like that. We've all had fires. We've all been single engine. We've all lost a system or two. But I had one that I needed to calculate 130 miles, and I made it by 1.5 inches. Or we would have ejected. This is interesting. It might tie into some of this ACM stuff. So I had the only total hydraulic failure in an F-14 landing. It's never supposed to happen because you have an isolated emergency hydraulics. Okay. It's supposed to be an isolated system away from combined flight, gear and flaps and nose gear steering and all your flight controls. So we're on a fight southwest of San Diego, and I'm in my first turn, 6.5 Gs, and all of a sudden there's no back pressure on the stick for a split second.
Like no resistance?
No resistance. So, of course, with all the pull, I pull it back, and I'm like, what the heck was that? And then the hydraulics came back, and my hand was where it was supposed to be, but I just kept the turn going until I was pointing at Miramar, rolled my wings level. It's about 130 miles away, and Cowboy Zerby's in my back seat, brand new Rio. And he's like, "What's going on there, Heater?" And I said, "I just felt something in the stick I've never felt before." Now, had I been younger or my first cruise in F4s, you kill for an ACM mission, right? So you punch out the master caution and you reset all the
Keep
lights.
going.
You put tape over these lights, and it's like, fights on.
That's right.
Let's go for it. I'm not losing this. But I think only because I had so many dogfights, and this felt so weird to me, even though there wasn't a light on in the cockpit, I asked the wingy to come and check me out. So he flies over, and I'm not using any flight controls. I said, I'm not going to keep it level. I'm just trimming it up, aiming it home, and we're going to do whatever we do on the way there, but I'm not putting any more hydraulic inputs in.
Because if you do and there's a leak, you might be forcing it out faster. Okay.
And so he comes up, and he says, "You're not going to believe this." So what do you see? I don't know if a panel fell off or what. He goes, "Heater, you got a pencil beam of red coming out of your side of your airplane." And of course, red is the hydraulic fluid.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "As thick as a pencil, it goes straight out. I can't believe it. We're doing like 350 knots. It's straight out till it hits about 6 feet, and then it starts curling back a little bit and turns into a spray. So that's what 3,000 PSI will do for you."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "All right, knock it off. We're done for the day. I'm going to take this thing back." So I tell Neil to Cowboy Zerby, I said, I'm going to squawk emergency. You take care of center. I can tell I'm going to fly over Mexico. I can see the bull ring. I said, he goes, "We don't want to fly over Mexico." And I said, "We're flying over Mexico."
Yeah.
And so it goes back to the MiG stuff, because we used to practice flame out landings in Groom Lake, where you had to hit high key, put one turn in, go down, and then glide in and land. So that's what I was going to do. I was going to fly right past the beam and then make one turn and then bring it in for a landing as I dirty up with the pneumatics. So we're coming back, and finally the light comes on. It's the combined hydraulics, so that's going down. So we're going through the boldface for that. Next thing I know, flight starts going down, and that's my flight controls. And up till then, it was like, no problem. You got an emergency backup system. But they had lost 25 airplanes at sea in the bottom of the ocean. And all the pilot could say is he lost control of the aircraft. It started with a hydraulic emergency, and next thing you know, they're jumping out. Not everyone jumped out, so we even lost some crews to a couple of those. But Grumman told me 25 airplanes were lost before that one. So I'm coming back. I hit about 10,000 feet high key, where I say, all right, I'm going to do one little trim turn, and I turn the airplane in. And up to then, I didn't care about altitude or heading. I just let it, because I felt like anything might be the last. And we turn in, blow the gear down, blow the hook down, and I'm going for a trap, and emergencies all set, and my squadron duty officer's listening to the whole thing. So the reason I said we went 130 miles, if I had not done anything different, I would have missed it by 1.5 inches, but we made it by 1.5 inches. And believe me, I've screwed up a lot of stuff and have a lot of regrets. But this one, I happened to do every single thing right. And I noticed you had a tail hook over here. So we're coming in, and Cowboy's got his hands on the handle.
He's ready to send you guys out of there.
We're ready to go, because I've got no utility, no flight. Emergency is banging, and all the lights are on, and emergency is getting really, really low. And as I get in the short final, the stick starts coming back into my lap. So I'm pushing with both hands as hard as I can, and it's just saying, nope, I'm going nose up, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I'm almost touching down, but I haven't got down yet. I don't know how high my gear were above the ground, but they didn't hit the ground. So if this is the cable that's sitting on the ground, this is that 1.5 inches. So I caught the cable. Had I been this much higher, 1.5 inches higher, I would have either spit it or missed it. And what happened as I'm pushing full forward and that nose is coming up is the hook goes down, gets the wire while I'm in the air. We feel it tug, and I'm ready for a big crash on the main mounts. But we went out far enough that dissipated a lot of energy, and then boom, we land here, roll out. So we're both thinking, whoosh, and Cowboy, I think, actually pulled it out of the detent. But he didn't shoot us out. So I get out of the airplane and I'm thinking, let's look at this pile of red fluid that's going to be everywhere. There was nothing.
It was all depleted
fluid anywhere. The Grumman guys take it in, check it out. They come running back to my OPSO office at the RAG, and they go, Heater, do you know how much hydraulic fluid you had left in the entire system? We vacuum drained the entire system, all the piping, everything. I said, I have no idea. He goes, 1/2 pint. 1/2 pint. And so they went into it, came up with 29 engineering changes, NATOP changes, engineering changes to the F-14. They had no idea there was this freakish accident that you could pump out, if the hole was in the right place, the isolated emergency hydraulics could pump out all the fluid if one of the other two had a leak. And they never knew that before. So they implemented 24 of the 29 engineering change proposals.
To the whole fleet.
To the whole fleet, changed the NATOPs, and I was thinking, wow, if I would have done one thing different from the time I felt that pop, we would have ejected somewhere.
And it would have been just one more airplane they couldn't study to come up with.
Yeah, if I went in the water,
yeah.
They wouldn't have studied it. Went in the land, my worst nightmare, might have hurt somebody. So
true.
That would have been really bad.
Did the rate of that incident for other, because you said they lost like 25 aircraft, so did that put a kibosh on that?
Yeah, no more hydraulic
Really?
losses. None.
All right.
And the flight worked perfectly after that.
I have a question about this, and it's going to sound a little bit like Monday morning quarterbacking, so I apologize in advance. What about North Island? Was that an option?
It was, but if you grab the pocket manual, they all said land as soon as practicable. So one of the changes was land as soon as possible, which would have meant North Island. And we considered it, but as the OPSO, who was getting in the RAG, when I first got there, people were taking a year. And almost half their flights were refresher flights because they'd sit around for a week, and you couldn't give them a syllabus hop. So I had this relationship with maintenance, and I got 3 schedulers in there, and I said, this is how we're going to cut that time in half. And we got it down to 28 weeks. From a guy gets onboarded, 28 weeks later, he's going to the fleet. Full up round, Carqual, all that stuff. So in the back of my mind, I'm saying, now you're not taking it to Miramar so that maintenance can work on it instead of getting on a truck and putting everything they need. And with that kind of damage, it would have been a hangar queen forever down there. And I wanted it with the Grumman experts and everyone up there. And because I had an out, it was land as soon as practicable, which is basically go back to your home base. Mm-hmm. And if it would have said land as soon as possible, North Island would have been it.
Yeah.
But it's a good question. Well, typical Top Gun. And I do that all the time to myself.
Yeah.
What were you thinking?
Well, right. I mean, a couple decades after that, they did have an F-18 that overflew North Island, and they were troubleshooting. I think it was with the Marine Training Squadron, and it ended up going into a neighborhood. And part of that was, hey, you had North Island right there. So again, I already caveated it. It was Monday morning quarterbacking on my part. It's got a happy ending, but
Yeah.
It sounds like not only the land as soon as practical, but from a bigger point of view, as the OPSO, you knew that I would rather have this airplane there than here. And it's great that it worked out.
Right.
Might not have if you'd have missed it by the inch and a quarter or whatever.
Yeah, and I was second guessing myself, making sure. Now, I'm not overflying North Island because I want my maintainers to be able to fix it. It was in my mind, so I had to talk myself out of it. But the practicable, got me and Cowboy totally off the hook. And then not long after that was good head work, I think, just planning for the worst. But I had one which was a lot more fancy flying, and we probably shouldn't have got out of it. So I come into the break in an F-14 at Miramar not long after that. And you trim up when you get to the 180. So I trim, and the trim screw jack goes right off the rails. So now I got stabs, almost full stab.
Wow.
So I'm at the 180 going into a stall, and the nose keeps coming up, and my stick is against the instrument panel. I can't push it any more forward. So I have to rudder it down like this and then scoop it out, and it starts climbing up again. And I realized if I'm right around 150 or better, it's climbing. It can't help it because the stick's way back. And if I'm at 140, I have a little bit of control. I had like a half inch or less play in it. So I had to go all the way around and try to learn how to fly the thing. So I did a 360 over the airport talking to Tower, what I'm going to do. And I mean, every now and then that thing would just come up, and we thought, this is it. And I would rudder it over and get the nose back down and then keep it turning, coming around. And I remember landing that thing, and it was against the cockpit, and the nose kept coming up, and it was like boink, 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 boink. I landed it, and I thought, okay, that was some pretty good flying.
What'd your Rio think of that whole odyssey?
He was really glad to be on the deck. He was really nervous because it's hard to talk between each other. You want to say, do you got it? Do you got it?
Yeah.
And he knows that's just going to upset things. But he could tell because you don't do that in the pattern. And that nose just wanted the stabs just squatted the airplane. The nose was coming up, and the only way I could turn it was with the rudders. I was afraid if I used the spoilers, it would adverse yaw and stall out.
Reminds me of Duke and Willie D's story when they got shot down by the SA-2, I think it was, and they had to kind of do the same thing in an F-4 just to get feet wet so they wouldn't get captured before they jumped out. But
we'll be seeing them this weekend.
Oh, yeah? They're both going to be there?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Good. Well, speaking of the Top Gun 55th, I mean, again, you and Mooch talked a lot about your role in the movie, and I don't know, is there anything more we need to talk about here on this show? Because, right, maybe for those who don't know, the Reader's Digest version is you took a bunch of pictures. Some are, well, most of them that I've seen are fantastic, and some made it into a magazine that then two guys were looking to make a movie saw and said, wait, let's make a movie about this. So I guess it's been chronicled. So what more is there to talk about with your role in the movie Top Gun?
Yeah, the two guys were the producers of Flashdance. So, yeah, they were, Don Simpson, famous producer, had a toothache. And those guys did everything together, so they went to the dentist together. He was looking at a magazine, Jerry Bruckheimer, and he got to that picture right there. And he especially liked the reflections in the visor and the whole 9 yards. And he said, this looks like Star Wars on Earth. This is our next movie. Plopped it on Don Simpson's lap. And they made a movie. They didn't even have a script. They went to see Secretary Lehman, and they had a picture and a short little write-up and got permission to do the movie. They didn't even know what the movie was going to be.
Well, but they had
about.
credibility too, right?
Yeah.
If they had been two kids fresh out of film school, it might have been a different story.
Right. Yeah, they had done a big movie, and they were hot. They were the hottest producers in Hollywood at the time. And I'm glad they did it.
Yeah.
And I didn't know about that. That happened 2 years prior to me even bumping into anybody from the movie.
And you told Mooch that picture wasn't like, okay, everyone get in this perfect position. It sounded to me more like I'm just going to reach over and see what I can get here.
Yeah, we were forming up, coming back to the boat, and I could tell that was all the makings of a great picture. So, yeah, and I knew it wouldn't work if I shot it from here, like over the shoulder. So I just did inverted backwards as far as I could get.
It's amazing, really, the impact of one instant in time, if you will. That picture, think about what that's done. I mean, it's on the cover of Cutting Edge. Didn't you say there's a gentleman that's doing a painting of it, or maybe it's already done?
He did a 40 by 60 painting, and this is actually a postcard of the painting.
Okay.
I have a lot of fans now because of the Top Gun movie. So I went from being a shit-hot pilot to, oh, you were in the movie? Wow.
That's a good combination, by the way.
Yeah, they all say, hey, if it wasn't for that picture, there wouldn't be a Top Gun. And there wouldn't be a Top Gun Maverick. So it's kind of cool.
It's hard to know what alternative universe we could live in where, there wouldn't be. I mean, maybe something else would have inspired something similar, but, we all saw how Iron Eagle went. So I guess we'll leave it at that. All right, but hold on. Of all the things you've done, I thought somewhere, a little birdie told me, were you involved with some camouflage paint schemes or something like that?
In a big way.
Yeah?
A big way.
All right, you got to tell me because I'm not aware of this at all.
In fact, there's modelers all over the world that are making my model with the heater paint scheme.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, so it started when I went to Top Gun as a student. F4s had white bellies and white flight controls, ailerons and tails. It's because we had a nuclear mission. So that was supposed to protect us from the radiation, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So the night before, I was a corrosion control officer, I think, at the time. So I got my guys to paint all the white on the airplane gray. And we went with flat gray instead of the glossy gray that everybody had. So we were the first ones there that ever did that. And the instructors said, it makes a difference. I noticed it. And I started thinking, they're working on stealth, but nobody's working on a visual signature reduction. Visual. So I knew a lot about photography, and I started studying about how eyes see, and I started studying all the paint that was out there. And every artist knows that in the distance, if you look way in the distance, it's kind of gray and hazy. You don't have a vivid green mountain full of trees. It's this kind of hazy purple mountain majesty way out there. I said, all right, I'm going to come up with a paint scheme. And so I made a zillion models and started painting them in 4 different colors, with the idea of the visual signature reduction. I wanted part of the airplane to disappear at all times, whether it was the darkest one, the lightest one, or 2 in between. And I figured out the mean because in a camera, 18% of the light is coming out of a normal shot, right? Normal light meter in a camera, if you're outdoors, it says, of all the light that hitting your subject, 18% is coming back into the camera, so I'll expose for that. So I took a paint that was 18% reflectance. I went up a couple, like 7% each, and down 1. And I used those 4 colors, which is very handy the way the Navy does them, because the first number is glossy, semi, or flat. 1, 2, 3. The second number is the color, like 5 is blue, 6 is gray. And then the 3 numbers at the end are the reflectance. So 27.5 means it's reflecting 27.5% of the light. So then, being corrosion control and knowing how hard it is to paint an airplane, I realized you can't just have an airplane with the best camouflage ever, because after a few cycles of corrosion control, you'll never be able to maintain the continuity of the design. So I had to make something easy to apply, easy to maintain, and still effective in the air. And so that meant it had to be asymmetric. So I did asymmetric stripes on an aircraft. We did a whole Top Gun journal article about it. I ended up with this huge briefing, 2-hour briefing on how you see every animal in the animal kingdom and how like sharks and other animals do counter shading. So they have white bellies because that's where the shadow is, and they want to counteract the shadow. And they have darker tops because that's where the sun's hitting. They want to counteract that. And then you have what they call dazzle schemes. Remember those weird schemes in World War II with the ships to keep from getting hit by submarines and torpedoes? Well, a zebra is like a dazzle scheme, and so is a killer whale. So I start looking at every animal in the animal kingdom and then realizing you're just not standing out in a field like a bunny rabbit hiding from a fox, hoping the light is countershaded. You're all over the place. So the sun's on your belly, the sun's on your top, sides, everywhere. So I had this wraparound scheme with those 4 colors and briefed the reserves, and 302 and 301 painted all of their F4s immediately, like 77, 78. So you had 2 full fighter squadrons in that paint scheme, and they were coming back with all kinds of story. We got to fly closer combat spread. We're having,
couldn't see each other.
Oh yeah, we can't keep track of our other guy in the fight, but we're winning like crazy. The bogies are losing sight of us, or they can't figure out what angle we're at. So right about that time, I go to Tonopah, and I painted up the T-38 that we used back and forth in that scheme. I should have brought the Top Gun journal because it shows how invisible it can be. General Cunningham says, I heard about this airplane. I want to check out this camouflage. So he comes up, I think he's in an F5, and he's trying to get 24 or 12 frames like we talked about earlier on the fuselage. So I go up in the heater paint scheme camouflage with a canopy on the bottom and a wraparound camouflage scheme. And we're going to do the butterfly maneuver, which is a very basic maneuver where you're just a target, like a banner, and he gets to practice getting his pipper on and seeing how many frames of film he can get on you. And so we do that with a normal T-38, and he's good enough to get 12, get a kill, 24 all over, another kill, and he did it every time. So we land, debrief, look at the film, get in the airplanes again. Now I'm in the heater paint scheme. And the first thing I did on the very first move is I go like that and turn away. He pulls in super hard and then reverses to be able to get the snapshot and maybe tracking shot. And I don't come out. I'm over here. He's like, what? Let's set it up again. So we set it up again. I turn in. It doesn't look like I'm a planform because whenever you have a fourth or a third of your airplane missing, it not only doesn't look the same, but if it's far enough away and your eye can resolve something this big, but when you make it this small, it's below the resolution of the eye. Gone, disappeared. So the next one, he went on the wrong plane, then he had to readjust to try to get down to where I was, even though I was pulling a level turn. Long story short, we did 5 or 6 of those, never got a shot.
Wow.
He never even got one frame on the T-38. We landed, we go immediately to the debriefing room, and he said, park that in the hangar. We used to always worry about the Soviet satellites and couldn't be on the ramp when they were out. And I've had to go to idle and coast right into the hangar before as they're counting down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Nice.
And you get in, shut it. So he goes, Heater, we're classifying that. It's got to be classified. And he goes, that was way too effective. And so I didn't know what to do because we had airplanes at Top Gun painted like that, an A4 and an F5. And I had 2 full squadrons of F4s painted like that. So I didn't tell him anything. And I said, well, maybe we can do a red flag camouflage thing. So they did a whole red flag with the idea that they would have an extra camouflage evaluation during red flag.
Mm-hmm.
So they had the brown ones and green ones and all kinds of ones that you see now even. And it would take a long, detailed explanation to say why some of those exotic schemes just don't work. They might as well take the 5 colors that they used, pour it into one thing, paint it all the same color, because they're not getting it. When you have the same colors at every edge of the airplane, you're not hiding a part of the airplane. It might look cool, but you're not making anything disappear.
Mm-hmm.
So if I go like that, you don't know that's a hand anymore from way back there. But if everything has a color on it, you're never missing a key part that makes you go, I don't know what kind of airplane it is, I don't know what attitude it's in, and I can't tell the range because it always looks a lot further away than it really is. So the red flag evaluation came out. They sent it down to Gator, the admiral, and the heater paint scheme just blew everything away. So they said they're going to put it as a war reserve. So they wanted to classify it, and if we ever go to war, they're going to bring it out and paint the airplanes like that, and it'll be a war reserve camouflage. And so once the 302 did a bunch of cycles and I guess finally switched to the F-14, that went away. No more heater paint scheme. We had one in VF-1, which became very famous because it was the first F-14 painted like that. And he would always be the hooker. So the guy that was going to eyeball the bogey, fly straight in, this guy would hook. They would almost never see him. And he would come in and shoot everybody at the pass. So it worked really, really well. And it's a really in-depth, complicated conversation on how it works and why it works. But a very successful camouflage scheme. In fact, I knew it was going to be successful because after I did the models, hung them on string, got back the right distance, to make it the equivalent, I hired a bunch of guys in Las Vegas because I was up there by then, moving to the next thing. And we painted remote control airplanes in the scheme. And the guys would go and they would crash these expected, it was expensive tests.
Yeah.
But even though they were controlling it and they knew their eyes were fooling them as to what it was doing, and they crashed them. And that's when I knew I had a good paint scheme.
Where is this today? Is it? I hope it's declassified.
I hope it's still in a war reserve mode. I look at what's going on now, especially in like Top Gun Maverick. Remember how the Su-57s were painted up?
Mm-hmm. Which were artist renditions.
Well, they were pretty close to the Russians, real close. And I give Fergie a lot of credit because I was sitting in the theater in Top Gun Maverick. And when I first saw the felon, I just came out of my chair.
Mm-hmm.
But at the point where Tom Cruise was approaching the felon, I scared the hell out of this yeoman next to me. It was a female yeoman watching the movie. Secretary of the Navy sponsored it. And Kay's here, and she's there. And when that felon plan for him, came right here and made that maneuver, and I think the Rio said, what the heck?
Mm-hmm.
What I did, unconsciously, I stomped on the left rudder, I yanked back on the stick, went to idling boards.
In a theater seat.
In the theater of seats, because it's IMAX.
Yeah.
So this girl is freaking out as I do this in a half a second. Rudder, idle boards, aft stick. I'm switching the guns, stomping on that rudder, trying to get a snapshot as the felon goes by in the movie. It was that close. In fact, I got mad at everybody involved in the movie that Tom Cruise didn't at least try to get a snapshot there.
Yeah.
You and I would have. Anybody would have. And I sure did. And she looked at me like I was having some kind of a seizure or a fit. And I had to explain to her, I was just killing that Su-57. Sorry about that. And I said, I'm a fighter pilot, which explains everything.
That's right.
And so that was cool. But I noticed that camouflage, and I thought, man, the way AI is now, you could paint up a million different designs on any kind of airplane, fly it around on DCS, and compare and contrast. It took me years to develop it, and I could probably do it in 2 days now with all the technology available.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love that scene because they, as I understand it, filmed something else, probably an F-18, and then turned it in post-production into the Su-57. And it looked so believable. But the one thing that annoyed me was when they do show the faceless pilot, right? He always gets a gray visor, but the heroes are all clear. There's a big, do you notice it? A big canopy bow right down the middle like a TA-4J. And I'm like, come on, that's right on the lift vector. The technology would be better than that.
Right.
And when Maverick does finally use the gun, because I don't think he ever does in the first movie, this is my biggest beef with Hollywood. It's that rat-a-tat-tat, M61. Come on,
Right.
It's 6,000 rounds a minute. It's 100 rounds a second. It's a zipper sound, not a machine gun sound.
Right.
That always gets me.
It's almost like a growl.
Yeah. But hold on. I got to go back because I get this question all the time on the show. People email me and say, hey, did you ever fly against false canopies? And did you find that they worked? You just mentioned it. Me personally, I didn't find them to be a big deal, but generally they just took the standard F-18, the Marines for a while, and then I think the Canadians, and painted a fake canopy on the bottom. Never did much to me. I'm not pretending to be better than anyone else, but they didn't have the rest of that camo that you were talking about. But when it comes to false canopies alone, did you ever find, in your experience, it made much of a difference?
I found it did. In fact, when we fooled the general by turning away, it was the canopy on the bottom that probably did it. But here's the difference. Back then, we had really bad winders. I mean, when I was first at Top Gun, if you were inside 40 degrees in a turn, you couldn't shoot. It was a 40-degree
right
cone.
up the tail, right?
Well, 40 degrees. If you were at 45, it would never make it. So you had this 40-degree cone, dead six was good, a lot more in the belly because you're turning that way, but it was basically a small cone. And then the Lima came out, and all aspect, so it's like, I don't care if that's the real canopy or painted canopy. You're a fireball now,
Yeah.
So then it didn't matter.
Yeah.
And because you could shoot at all aspect. But in the middle of the fight, every now and then, sometimes people went, oh, shit, and then they make a move, and then they realize, oh, he's turning away.
Yeah. But in that opening move, right, had you not been doing a test, had you been, no kidding, like in a beam or what we'd call, right, a butterfly or a beam set? No, this would have to be in a beam set for my scenario to work right. Had you turned away and see if that false canopy will work, and it didn't, that's a BFM error. So you've just now basically turned.
Right.
So I guess my answer to a lot of people is, number one, I didn't find that it made a big difference to me. But number two, if you rely on it and try to do something, to spoof the guy and it doesn't work, you kind of screwed yourself.
You would never, ever spoof the guy. Never, ever use it to spoof the guy. In fact, the paint scheme should be totally passive, and you should never even think about it. You just go about your fight. And Keith Ferris, he didn't invent it. They had it in World War I, World War II. I studied all the camouflage. They had cellophane airplanes. So the old wooden frames, they used transparent material and had like an invisible airplane back then. They used to paint motors asymmetrically on the wings to make it look different. And there were all kinds of optical illusions that they tried, and a zillion different paint schemes that either worked or didn't for all kinds of various reasons. They did try the canopy on the bottom, and but Ferris patented it and then sold it to the Canadians, and they put it on the bottom of every single one of their F-18s. So they'd be a good group to ask. But you're right. I didn't think it was that special. It didn't work. And I wanted something way far out there to make you invisible. It made you smaller than the eyeball could see. And then when you did see it, you couldn't tell what aspect, couldn't make sense, couldn't ID it. And it would help get the ID much closer in, where you had a huge advantage.
Interesting. What about this book, though? I mean, I don't know. You told me not to ask you about it. I'm going to ask you about it anyway. Come on. Can we talk about The Cutting Edge?
If you want, yeah.
I mean, to me as a kid, this was more important than a Playboy. I loved this book.
Yeah.
I looked at the pages. I read every caption next to every picture. I imagined myself being part of that universe. And so it is, and I've got some listener questions coming up, and part of your followers, not just because you were in the movie Top Gun and helped make it, but because you had this book. I mean, we all love it. I feel like there's something about it you don't love.
Well, when I did those 2 emergencies, I was supposed to be the Tomcat of the Year. They took a picture of me and everything. And when I went up to the Admiral to, go to Tailhook and get the award, the Admiral literally said, he's got enough publicity already. Find somebody else. So Tomcat of the Year would have been nice. And they took a picture in front of my airplane for it. And they basically told me, you got it. All the Grumman guys were saying, make sure you're at Tailhook, wink, wink,
Mm-hmm.
And then I found out later the Admiral said no. And because of that book, he said, he's already got enough publicity.
Was this Admiral an aviator?
Yeah.
Huh. All right.
If it would have been Gator, Admiral Gilchrist, he would have done it. Gator came up when I was in the Red Eagles and frocked me personally.
Meaning promoted you to the next level, but before it's official.
Because I was the youngest guy there. Everybody else was a major, and I was a lieutenant. And so he made me a lieutenant commander just like that, and blew the skipper's mind, because they don't do that kind of stuff in the Air Force. So one day I was lieutenant, next day I'm lieutenant commander, like all the Air Force guys. So he was good, and he loved it. And I'd say 99% of the people loved it. The CNO used it as a gift. I mean, it made the cover of USA Today as the best Christmas present you could give in '86, I think. It's on the cover of USA Today.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of good things about it. And like you, I probably have close to 10,000 letters and contacts of people that say, I'm in the Navy, or I'm flying F-18s, or back then F-14s, because of your book. Other people got in the Navy and flew other aircraft because of that book. And it's been passed down a generation. By now, fathers have died, and the sons got it, and they send it back to me for a different inscription. So it's impacted a lot of people. And the publisher said when it hit, I think, 400,000, it was the #1 coffee table book ever. And it went over 500,000. So it has a lot of circulation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a double-edged sword. I'm glad I did it. It was really great. Basically 12 years of shooting from 72 to 85, 13 years. All I had to do was go here. And then that company put the book together.
Mm-hmm. What about you have quotes from different pilots. I remember looking at the F-18 picture that's in there, and then I realized later it's the backseat of a B, but you've got like quotes from LSOs and F-18 pilots and an F-14 Rio, quote unquote. So were those just, hey, give me something we can put in the book?
Yeah, I just called them up. I need a quote.
Yeah.
And I got all the quotes for them because I wanted it more realistic.
Well, I won't press you on it, but I'm among the the 500,000 where the book just meant so much to me. And I loved it. I don't think this is the original version that I got, but I think a listener had sent this to me at some point when I said I didn't have a copy anymore. Because you can't find it except, used on eBay and Amazon?
Yeah, we still get 3 or 4 a week from FedEx and
sign them and turn around and send them back.
Yeah, they self-addressed stamped envelope, and then they tell me how much they cost. I mean, it was only $38 when it started, and now you can see them going for $496 because it's been out of print for decades.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe you'll find it in there. Is it towards the back?
Here it is.
Okay.
Right here.
Yeah.
So this is one of 20 photos that Tony mounted, and he would show the actors and get them excited. But he particularly liked that silhouette.
That looks like it's from the movie. I feel like Tom Cruise is going to walk up there and start pre-flighting.
He tried to get a shot like this, but here, I'll have to show you again. He didn't know at the time, because I wasn't on the ship with him, is I'm on the angle deck on the center line, 100 yards up. And this aircraft is tied down right on the fantail. Normally, you don't get all of that water. We're in real pitching seas. So when the deck went way down, I shot that picture. And normally, you'd only have a tiny bit of water here on the horizon. So Tony wants that shot in the movie. And he's walking around the ship with that picture, putting it, and he finally figures out, Heater must have done that on the elevator. So they put an F-14 on the elevator, lowered the elevator so it would be closer to the water. And then he said, all right, now I need the sun backlit.
Turn the ship.
And they said, well, we're not turning the ship. So he runs up to the bridge and he goes, I need you to turn in this direction so that I can get the shot. And then the captain said, no, we have an agreement. You shoot what you can shoot. We operate, and we don't change a thing for Hollywood. And he said, all right, how much would it cost? And he goes, well, I have no idea. We goes, just tell me, how much would it cost? So the captain had somebody amortize everyone's salary. And they said, all right, this is what it costs for 1 hour of 5,000 guys on this carrier. This is how much the fuel would cost, and this is how long it's going to take to turn, how long will you need for the picture. 1 minute. You give me 1 minute, I'll get the shot, and then you can turn back. So I think they figured out it would take 12 minutes or something like that. And they multiplied that times the fuel and the salaries, so amortized down to 12 minutes. And they go, $22,000. So he wrote him a check for $22,000 and gave it to him. And, of course, that bounced. And Bill Bottolato, the producer, was on the hook for it. And he made it work out in a different way. But Bill Bottolato was quick to point out when they got back ashore, Heater, you cost us $22,000 with that photo. And they replicated it pretty well by using the elevator. And then, like Kaczynski did with a lot of Top Gun Maverick, he paid a lot of homage to Tony. So they even have a scene like that in Top Gun Maverick where they tried to do the backlit thing.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it was
I'm glad you
cool.
found that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on. I have a system called Patreon that allows people to support the show, which is great. Keeps our lights on in the studio and everything. And I let them know I'm going to sit down with you, and they get back to me with questions. So let's cover a couple of these. Jevin wants to know, what are some moments in your military aviation career which you wish you had captured on film but were unable to?
Oh, my goodness.
I have to think maybe some of the stuff you did outside of Nellis. That would have put you in jail at the time.
Actually, I had to do the lectures for all the MiGs. So I took 140 slides of each MiG.
Wow.
Best pictures I've ever taken because they were photo mission for the lectures. So unbelievably fabulous photos. It's so different than when you're just flying around and you go, oh, that looks good, click.
Mm-hmm.
When you can set it up, set the sun up, the clouds, the background, and those 140 Kodak slide carousels with over 300, actually I guess that would be 420, of the best slides I've ever taken of MiGs were in the edge of the Pentagon when the plane hit it, and they all got burned up.
Oh, my gosh.
And they're all gone.
Wow.
Yeah. There's some pictures where you're in the middle of a fight and there's so many things you're looking at that you want to use for a debrief, and you wish you could take your camera out and shoot it, but you can't. And there's also some of the most gorgeous scenery, and you're just flying a mission, so you can't. So I think I told Mooch, it's kind of like, for every picture you get, you probably missed 100,000. It's that kind of ratio.
Yeah.
I'm always clicking with my eyes. I'm like, I click, click. Oh.
Well, there's
And
something
I
to be
know
said.
I'm missing photos.
Sure,
like crazy.
but there's something to be said for making a mental snapshot of it. But unfortunately, you just can't share that with everyone.
No, and those are the ones I miss. And then that's when I wished I was a Rio. I'd go, I could shoot all the time.
Well, Bio took a lot of pictures.
He
I think.
did. Yeah. I'm jealous.
Well,
Here's the key. It took me 12 years to shoot the cutting edge, one out of every 100,000 I see. So they come to me and they say, we need you to do the same book, but for the Marine Corps, called Forged in Steel. And I said, no, I'm leaving the West Coast. I'm going to Ward College. They came back to me and said, well, John Glenn said he'll only do the book if you use this photographer. He didn't know me. He just pointed at the cutting edge and said, I want that photographer. And so I said, well, let me see what I can do. And it turned out the Marines were like super happy. And I got to be involved with General Fred McCorkle, callsign Assassin. You probably know him.
I've met him.
Fabulous guy, lots of stories. Just a wonderful man. And let me fly every helicopter they had and every jet except the Harrier. And he took me up in the helicopters, and then he'd say, you got it. And he was trying to humble me as a fighter pilot who couldn't fly a helo. What he didn't know, and I didn't tell him to this moment, is my brother's a helo pilot. So he took me on a couple rides, and we did the whole square thing where you go around the four corners and a bunch of helo rudimentary practices. So I did way, way, way better than he expected. And if he sees this, he'll know why. Until now, he thought I was just gifted, but I cheated.
Way back on episode 2 of the Fighter Pilot podcast, I opined that Assassin, Mr. Fred McCorkle, created his own call sign when he became a flag general. And no, I know. So I have since corrected myself, and I haven't seen him since, but he was, I think, the MAG or wing commander when I was a student at VMFAT 101 in El Toro way back when. And he came in, and I just sat there like, whoa. And, but yeah, the story of how he got his call sign is pretty impressive.
It's a gruesome one.
Yeah.
It involves their shovel. The shovel that goes 90 degrees or acts like a shovel. Yeah.
No good.
You can fill in the rest with Assassin and Vietnam. Now, the point was, I take my camera and I go to El Toro for a day. I go to Pendleton for a day. I'm flying Broncos and every helo on every kind of mission. And just, I got more film on one flight than I would get in a month, on cruise, taking pictures. And so then he said, come out to Yuma. So in Yuma, I got to fly every mission, all the big briefs, little things. I was in the front seat of a Huey Cobra with 10 Cobras on my right, all down low in the weeds. I'm in the front seat flying, and we're on a machine gun mission, air to ground, and shooting rockets. So I got pictures of all of that. In less than 3 weeks, I'm at War College. I send them all the film, and they said, oh, my God, Heater, we got a whole book here, but there's nothing on an LPH. And I go, these are short. And he said, we really would like to get some on the LPH. So I find that there's one in Camp Lejeune. I go to my War College professor, kind of sheepishly. I know I just got here, but can I go down and shoot a day? They've offered me this gig because they were having a media day there, and they were just going to piggyback me onto it. And he goes, this is all about being purple. said, you could sit here in class and we could teach it, or you could go to Lejeune and get on an LPH and fly helos and do all that stuff. So I fly down there, shoot a little more, come back. I'm still under 21 days of shooting, whole book, more pictures than I had in the cutting edge. So that's the difference when you're a dedicated photographer and you're in the back seat. Piece of cake.
That was Jevon's question. Let's move on to one from Joe Kunzler, who takes a lot of photographs up in the Pacific Northwest. He wants to know, what makes a good airplane photo?
Lighting. I think you have to have dramatic lighting and good composition. A lot of people have the shadows going the wrong way, and it looks awful. They have the sun in the wrong position. So you could take a perfect picture and just change the light in the background, and it's still the same airplane, but it's a horrible picture. When the producer said, Heater, you ought to go to USC film school, Tony told him right away, no. And they said, what do you mean no? He said, he's got an eye. They can't teach that at USC. He's already got the eye. So he didn't realize I had years of photojournalism where I was talking to the top photojournalists in the country, including National Geographic, which they call the Missouri Mafia, because so many Mizzou grads go to the National Geographic to shoot. So that is something you probably didn't expect, but it's light. And usually you don't want to chop things off the airplane. Wingtips missing, tails missing, because that usually is upsetting unless you're doing it for some kind of specific reason. But you get the light right and the clouds right and background and a nice angle that shows a lot of the airplane, you'll have a good picture.
Do you still do photography?
With my iPhone, I rarely carry my Nikon.
Okay.
The Nikon was at my fingertips in every squadron, even the MiGs, and all my journalism life before that. And for some reason, it just got heavy and bulky and extra, and I wasn't clicking many shots. And I don't think I've used the Nikon in years. I shoot with the iPhone now.
Yeah. Well, there's a pretty good camera on there, but did you find, does your mindset change when you know you can just hit a button and delete it versus the development process and the cost of film and everything else?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I bet. All right. Jim Gundog has a great question. What would you have done with a handful of GoPro type cameras back then? Probably the same thing I did, which is put them up and go flying.
Yeah, I would have went crazy. When I saw that, it was like, oh, man, I wish I had that. That would have been, because I've done some crazy low levels in Star Wars Canyon and Oman, and we flew under electrical wires in Germany. They had no deck. The deck was the deck.
Was the ground?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
And we were flying below farmer silos and in and out, because they wanted to do that because they were so close to the Russians. That was the way they did it. In fact, they'd come in and ask for a AAA entry, and that was to get as low as you can so the AAA guys couldn't find you, and you could attack the base from any angle, as low as you could go.
Crazy. Scott Morris wants to know, when you were taking pictures and publishing The Cutting Edge, did you ever realize the effect you were having on so many people? From a personal perspective, this is Scott saying, that book started my love of photography.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, I have probably more than 10,000 comments like that when I see people, and letters and books with all kinds of stories. So to his point, when I did it, no, I didn't know, because like we talked about earlier, the publishers came to my house and said, hey, we know you have a lot of photos. Let me look at them. And that's when they said, oh my gosh, there's a whole book here. So I had never shot them to do a book. They sort of just flew in and said, hey, we're going to do a book out of all these photos you did. And what inspired me, like you, was luckily my dad had a bunch of World War I and World War II books of airplanes. And I would just look at those, and then for a while I'd say, one day I'm going to be a good photographer and I'm going to get up there and get to see that stuff personally, and I'll take pictures of it. And then sometime later, and as a kid still, I actually dared to think, no, I'm going to be the pilot in those pictures. I'm going to fly fighters. And me and my childhood buddy used to sit on a hill overlooking Palmerton, Pennsylvania. They had a bunch of red rocks. And when we would dig out a cockpit, we'd have cardboard with the end of tin cans, which all our food came in. You know how you had to open the top. And those were perfect dials to put on the cardboard. We'd put a stick in the ground, and he'd be there, and I'd be there. And since we were on a hill, all of Palmerton was below us. And so we'd throw a few rubber band-powered gliders off there and set the tone, and then we'd just sit up there and think about flying. He went to Vietnam when he was 17 and got all shot up, and we talked to this day. And he was my friend when we were 3, 4, 5 years old.
Wow.
And at that time, we were flying. And yeah, by the time I was 7 or 8, I said, I'm going to be a fighter pilot. And then they always interview the athletes or the letter winners in high school. And so in my interview, when they asked me what you were going to do, it says, I'm going to be a fighter pilot in the U.S. Navy. And then I'm going to go in the airlines, which you did, but I didn't. I stuck with fighters the whole time.
Yeah.
So I knew from 3 years old on, that's what I was going to do. And because I was so inspired by those books, I was really happy to his question that I made a book that all these people were writing me about and coming to our house. They would track me down. My wife remembers the time we just had Christmas, opened all the presents. My kids are out in the front porch playing with some of their new stuff. Car drives up. People walk out, cutting edge in hand. Christmas Day. Oh, sorry, we're from Oklahoma, and this thing is so important, and we'd hate to bother you on Christmas, but if you could just sign it, and there were so many people like that. What can you do? You just have to honor it, and that just happened forever.
You were like the Jesus Christ of naval aviation. They just wanted to touch your cloak on the way by, and they knew they'd be okay.
Well, this was the Ten Commandments or something, because they loved that book.
Yeah. Oh, boy. I've got one more question here. It's from Niels Hansen. Before I get to it, though, I want to sort of build into it a little bit. As we've talked about today with dogfighting, you are a man used to fighting. Did a lot of your fighting in a lot of different aircraft. You're still fighting a fight today. It's a different kind of fight.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you want to talk about that.
I don't know if the audience wants to hear it, but I got 3 bogeys behind my wing line, so I'm in a last-ditch guns maneuver right now because all 3 of them are progressive and they're terminal. So I'm making the best of the time I have now, but I am really anemic. My heart's got a lot of problems. I've got blood cancer, and I've got amyloidosis, and I've got a couple other things that those things have caused that complicate it even more. But the bottom line is probably no more baseball and tennis, and I did that religiously at a very competitive level, and we competed nationally for championship rings. And I want to get back to doing that, but I've got to get over this complete and utter exhaustion that I have because of all these things. So sitting here, I look kind of fine, but getting here takes all the energy I have.
Well, sorry to hear that. Niels Hansen says, looking back from now to being a kid, dreaming of flight, and you just regaled us with that, and everything that has transpired between, what is one memory, if you can narrow it down to one, that you cherish above all? Now, he doesn't necessarily ask about military aviation here, so it could be a wedding day or a birth of a child, too, for that matter. But this being the Fighter Pilot Podcast, I guess I'll narrow it down to that, if I may.
Well, I did put the Navy career and fighters in front of everything. I was a Top Gun for 4 years, and I didn't take a day of leave. So I was hard on my family because normally you balance that. And I think when it came to Top Gun and family, Top Gun always came first. And so I kind of look back and regret that. But he was talking about the best moment. So anything that means that much to you, probably my best moment was not only getting the orders to Top Gun, but getting there and being saturated in that kind of environment and realizing that there is no other place I'd rather be than right here, right now. So every morning I woke up and went to Top Gun, I was the happiest guy on earth. And I think the only fear I had was not measuring up. I wanted to make sure I gave 110% every single day because I loved it that much and I knew how important it was. So that was probably it, the realization that I was in Top Gun and I was doing a good job and I was helping other people, and that was just incredibly rewarding. And I look back at that with a lot of satisfaction.
No, I get it. I was unfortunate to not screen for command, and that is a disappointment to me. But when I look back at my career, I also think about all the amazing things and opportunities I had a chance to do. But really, and as we'll celebrate this weekend, Top Gun, I think for me, was the high water mark because you're around such excellence, such people that demand it and expect it from you, but also develop it in you and themselves. And just to be able to do something, as we've talked about here for the last however long it's been, to that level as you did both in MiGs and in F4s and F14s and on the diamond and every field and court you've been on, to a level of mastery is special. And I think that's something that naval aviation particularly has that makes it so special. And the fact that we not only do all those things, but then land on an aircraft carrier. Although I don't know if you're aware about this PLM thing now, precision landing mode, magic carpet. Have you heard of this? Carrier landings are easy now, apparently.
Oh,
That's not a big deal anymore. So just
because
erase,
it's auto?
just erase that whole thing. I can't explain it because I only sort of know about it from what I've heard from people on the show. But it's almost like a mode 1, but you're still flying it. But it's easy now, even at night. So at any rate, before that, it used to be really amazing to land on carriers that not everybody could do, and we did that. And so
I liked it, didn't you? I look forward to it.
I bet you were like, your jacket has a bunch of top 10. Yeah, so I had 2. I snuck in somehow twice. I was very blue collar.
Oh, okay. I wasn't that good my first cruise. I did a lot of deck spotting, so I'd always get a wire earlier than the 3-wire. But I figured it out, and I actually liked it, had no fear. And, I mean, super pitching deck at night in the goo, that still scared me. It scared everybody. But day landings, man, I would just, I'd do those all day long if I could.
For sure. I liked Neil's question because it really, it makes you think. And I think it's easy to have regrets. I mean, Top Gun is a busy time. My wife knew when we got there, we had our first child there, courtesy of some previous instructors' wives telling her, hey, just this is what to expect. So she kind of knew that going in. But we were there also during the leukemia cluster, which made it even harder. So she took off with the baby and in some ways made it easier for me because I could be at work all day. But it's a tough tour, but still a high water mark for me. So I enjoyed it. Anyway, getting back to this fight you're currently in, is there a place people, I mean, you've got quite a following. First off, you're the quintessential fighter pilot. You're sort of the Navy's more modern version of Robin Olds, if I may so say. I remember the picture of you in the back of the Cutting Edge, looking over with your fighter pilot mustache, like, this is the guy, like, this is the standard.
Yeah.
So, you are beloved. I return to my earlier comment, man, you're it. People, when they find out that you're in a fight with 3 bogeys behind you, they want to help. Is there a way people can support you?
They did. So they really came through. In fact, you mentioned Taco Bell. He came up with a donation page. And we had a very bad, grim diagnosis at the time. And people just came to my rescue. And it was a give tax-free kind of thing. So they got credit, I got money. And we got a whole lot of natural and homeopathic doctors because all my doctors just would say, you have this long to live. And here's how horrible it's going to be when you die. Here's all the things that are going to happen to you. And sorry, we have nothing for it. They haven't invented anything yet. I've already been on 7 experimental chemos. None of them worked. Then they've tried radioactive isotopes right in my body, which really screwed me up. That didn't work. So nothing's working. They only have experimental stuff. And so because of everybody being so generous and so supporting, it's unbelievable with their thoughts and prayers. I even had a 4-star general give me his rosary that he had in Iraq and in Afghanistan. It blew up his vehicle 6 times. And 6 times he and his crew survived, not a scratch. And he gave me that rosary that he had. And then he said, here, you need one more, when he found out what you just found out. And he pulls out this box with a beautiful rosary, not a combat rosary like that one was. I said, where did you get that? And he said, the Vatican. And I said, when did you get it? He goes, last month. And he goes, here you go. And the Pope blessed it himself. So I have that. And then the one doctor, when he found out about my diagnosis, I was in the exam table. And when he came in after he told me, he said, here, you need this more than I do. And he put his rosary on me. So those are the kind of friends that I have and the kind of people that supported me. And they came through with over $92,000 case, keeping track of every penny. And we put it to good use. And I have had all kinds of treatments I never would have had because of that. And I'm here talking to you, and they didn't expect me to be here. They thought I'd be in a walker before Christmas. And he told me, when you get your cane, make sure you get fitted for a walker. You'll need it by Christmas. And here we are in May, and I walked all the way up here myself.
Including upstairs.
Yeah.
And that's tough because, right, you spent a larger-than-life doing amazing things, documenting it for the rest of us, photographs, sports, flying different fighters, landing on aircraft carriers. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to say that should be enough, but I mean, you've done amazing things. Obviously, we all want more. That's the human experience, is more, more, more. But I hope you're satisfied, and I don't mean to write you off, but right? I mean, I hope you're satisfied with the things you've done and the things you've seen and the difference that you've made in so many people.
It helps, but I still have that fire in my belly. So this was replaced 3 weeks ago.
Your shoulder.
My whole left shoulder, my pitching shoulder. So it's coming along really well. And so I have this hope against hope that if I can get my legs back where I can run again without my heart, trying to stop and me getting exhausted, if I could somehow overcome that, or they invent an antibody that gets the amyloids out of my tissue, I'll be back playing ball. Because what you don't realize is I started in 30 plus and just kept winning championship rings. Every 5 years, there's a new age group. So you move up to 40 plus and now you're a rookie again, right? So when I moved to 70 and then 75 plus, I was a rookie and I made MVP and we won a world championship. They have an 80 plus team. So my goal is to try to get back there, if not this year, next year, if I'm still around, to play 75 plus, win another ring. I'm collecting them. I got enough for my toes now. And make it to 80 plus and keep playing, because they're really good ball players. This isn't like church softball. This is hard baseball.
Yeah.
And you're playing. There's Jose Canseco, Roger Clemens, all kinds of big names that are there playing ball.
But they're not going to let you pitch, right? Because you got a bionic shoulder now. You're going to be throwing 120 mile an hour.
No one's ever pitched with one of these. So they said, don't even get your hopes up. You'll be so disappointed. And I said, yeah, but it's only been 7 days and look what I can do. And they freaked out because nobody can do that. Even after a year, they said, you're not supposed to be able to do that. And I said, yeah, and I'm going to pitch. And they said, well, you'll be the first one. So we'll see. I'm going to give it a go. Got to have a goal, right?
So I'll tell you after we stop tape here in a little bit, but I had a situation when I was 39 years old that they told me nobody ever flies after. And I came back and flew 9G F-16s and everything. And I've not yet mentioned it on the show because I'm putting it in the book that I hope will be the climax at the end to surprise people that I came back from. So I won't tell you on tape, but we'll talk about it after. But golly, Heater, I hope for you to meet those goals and to keep being able to receive however many 10 bucks a week to sign, because I know there's a lot more out there that want to get signed. And for those who maybe, I don't know if you're still accepting help, and I don't mean to make you a charity case, but for those who either want to help or maybe just follow you, are you on social media? Or
No, I don't need any more financial help. We discovered everything you could pay money for that might help, and we used every bit of it, and some of mine. I even sold my fighter pilot car in order to have more money. And I miss that Maserati so much. But so we used all that to get me to where I am now. And now we need them to invent something new, because there's nothing that gets rid of amyloids that are already infiltrating all your tissue. So if I last till they come up with that, and they're close, they say they're within 2 or 3 years, it'll be good. And did you say $10 for a signature? No,
10 books.
10 books.
Yeah, I don't articulate well.
I not only send the books back, but I give them postcards and some other stuff, make them feel good. And I don't just sign it. I find out all about it and I inscribe it, because if you read the kind of things that you read there and you realize how special it is, not just to them, but their family and other people, you got to pay attention and give it your best shot. So I'm really proud to be able to do that.
Well, I am proud to be able to have you on this show, because in our own little world, we try to do the same thing. Just share this amazing world of military aviation and why it's so special and the people and the stories. And so you have definitely blessed me and hopefully the viewers and listeners by coming today, Heater. So thank you so much for that. What did I not ask you? Again, you've been on Taco Bell's show. That's not the restaurant, for those who might be confused. That's a gentleman whose last name is Bell, goes by Taco, just like you're Heater and I'm Jello. So he's on YouTube. Also, you can go over and check out Ward Carroll's interview. But between what you've told them and what you've told me and everything we've talked about, what else before we wrap up?
Well, if you had about 5 hours, we could talk about Hoser and Snort, which were two buddies of mine. I mean, they could do 5 books and 3 movies on Hoser alone. And luckily, I got to fight both of those guys quite a bit. And Snort was a good buddy. Snort actually took our kids up flying in his acrobatic airplane, took them 2 feet off the water, and did all sorts of acrobats. Do you have time for a Snort story that's
Absolutely.
not an airplane? He knew I shot bow, and Hoser and Snort shoot bow. And I'm talking about pins, carbon arrows. You know, you could put 5 arrows in one of those patches from 25 feet, better than a pistol. That's how accurate those bows are. So he said, well, come over to my range and let's shoot some. And he lived in Falls Church at the time. So this is a suburb in D.C. So I drive to his house for the first time, no phone nav system or Waze, and I get on his block, and there's a deer hanging from a tree in the middle of the D.C. suburbs, and I go, that's Snort's house. So I go in to see this archery range he has, and there's a target on the other side of the pool that he's got set up when I walk in through his garage. And I go, so this is your range? You shoot across the pool? Because I thought that was kind of close. And he goes, oh, no. So he walks in. We go through the kitchen, through the dining room, through the family room, back to the front door by the living room. And he goes, here's where we shoot from. So I went, oh, cool. So he's got his bow and I got my bow, and we're shooting through all the rooms of his house. And he said, by the way, my wife's coming home any minute now. And I said, well, that's right by the door on the garage. And he goes, yeah, but, you know, these carbon arrows are so fast. If she's not in your sight when you let go, you're not going to hit her. It'll be there before she gets there. So I said, I think I'll just wait. And she came home, and then I started shooting, and we were having a lot of fun. And then somebody told me later that Snort was shooting, And right when he released it, she had walked in with a couple grocery bags, and the arrow was going right at her. Because right when the front of her got in his sight, he released it. And she luckily kept walking, and the arrow went in the arch of her back, missed her by that much. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm glad I didn't shoot while I was. So that was kind of cool. And we did that a couple times. And I can't mention Snort without saying what he did with the lantern pod, because that changed F-14 warfare. It made all the F-14s the leaders of all the F-18s in Bosnia. And he has a huge reputation for how he flew and how he dogfought, especially slow speed. But what he did with the lantern pod,
our sister
legendary.
show had an episode about that, the F-14 Tomcast, as we called it. He was set to be on about a week before his mishap, or a week after the mishap, I guess. And the lantern episode they did talk about, because he was Commodore at the time, right? Or he was somewhere where he was able to fast track it.
Yeah, Comfit 1, I think.
Okay, yeah.
But it was him, and he really did a good job. He was a student, I think, in 78 when I was an instructor. So I was a young lieutenant.
Okay.
He was a brand new Tomcat guy, and he went through the class when I was an instructor.
Very cool. I'd seen him at Tailhook a couple times and invited him to be on the show. It never quite worked out, but I knew of him. I didn't know him. I don't think he knew me, but yeah, great loss for our community. Well, did Snort and his wife stay married after that incident?
I couldn't keep track.
That sounds a little scary.
I think he said 2 or 3 wives. I'm not sure how that went.
All right. We'll pivot off of that to you started the show with a couple patches that you gave me. Thank you. I will cherish these and put them on the wall as soon as we're done. If you'd be willing to accept it, I'd like to give you one that says Fighter Pilot Podcast Guest. Because now you are.
Very cool.
It's not quite as great a backstory as yours, but it's not a competition.
I might do this.
Yeah? What do you got?
I carry this wherever I go. There might be a space on it. In fact, whenever I travel on the airport, even coming here, people see that and they go, "Are you the Heater?" And I go, "I guess I'm Heater."
Yeah.
And they say, "I got your book," and then they tell me all about the book.
Yeah. Again, it's like, oh, here,
Even in
bless
Europe.
my child.
Even in
Europe, yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Very cool.
That thing is worldwide. It was published in Italian and French and in Great Britain, all over Europe. And there's a lot of people that say, "I'm flying Tornado because of you," or "I'm flying for Air France because I got interested in aviation because of that." So
I think
pretty cool.
I discovered that book about the time I decided that was what I wanted to do, because I'd been to the Point Mugu Air Show in 78 and watched the Blue Angels and A4s. And about the time my stepdad sat me down and said, "What are you going to do when you get out of high school in a couple of years?" and convinced me that, no, I could do that. That's not just something other people do. You, Eller was my real first name. That's what he called me at the time. You could be a fighter pilot. I said, really? And so once I got excited about it and found the book, then it just fueled the flame for me. So yeah, I know how those people feel, because like I said, when I found it, it was better than any other publication I might have been perusing at 16 years old.
cool.
Let's leave it at that.
I appreciate that a lot.
Well, usually we end with call sign stories. You told it to Mooch already, but CJ Heatley, Heater, I used to just think it was a play on your name, but
I'm sure it was for a lot of people, but the fact that I came in with everybody calling me that,
yeah.
that kind of stuck. And Sidewinders are heaters, and I definitely had a lot of shots. So it could have been a little of both of those things. And there's a lot of baseball players, I'm talking in the hundreds, that have played with me or against me, and most of them don't even know I was a fighter pilot. So they just think it was Heater from baseball, just like back at college or in high school. So it worked out great, because you can't pick your own call sign.
No.
In fact, when the book came out and I got famous for that instead of flying, my brother's call sign, who was Killer, because we were both boxers, and his call sign changed to Heater's brother. So that he was a helicopter pilot. So he had to wear Heater's brother for a couple of years.
I thought you were going to say they're going to make it cooler or something.
No, he got the last lap because he liked it. It was like,
there you go.
That doesn't hurt me.
Yeah.
Call me that. So that was pretty cool.
What's the Ewan McGregor was Obi-Wan in some of the early Star Wars, the first 2, 3, and then his brother, I guess, is a Royal, I'm going to get this wrong, but he's like a Royal Air Force helicopter pilot, and his call sign, I guess, is Obi-2 or something like that.
Oh.
Instead of Obi-Wan, Obi-2.
I don't know.
You never heard of this? Yeah,
No,
I don't know.
no.
I shouldn't probably do my research before I try to tell a story.
Did you have a fighter pilot call sign show where you actually talked about that kind of stuff?
Brian Ferguson, Ferg, episode 2, we talked about call signs because I knew right away. Episode 1 was what is a fighter pilot, just to get that out of the way.
Yeah.
And episode 2 was call signs. Everybody loves call signs.
Want a 1 minute call sign story?
Do it.
Pretty good.
Absolutely.
So I'm in VF-21,
Okay.
skipper. And we're at Miramar. And a guy just graduated from the RAG, Tennessee hunter fisherman, and big guy, good old boy. So he walks in the ready room, opens the door, and he sees like 24 guys sitting in ready room chairs, and I'm in front having an AOM. And he walks in and kind of takes in his chest, and he goes, "Hi, y'all. I'm Grizzly Bear. You can call me Grizz." And I go, "Welcome aboard, Pooh." And from that point on, he was Pooh Bear. And boy, did he hate that the first 3 or 4 months. But then, like usual, term of endearment, he loved it. And he was Pooh Bear the rest of his career.
There you go. Our Air Wing 11 05 deployment, I think it was, maybe 03, we had this big hulking guy, played linebacker in college and looked like Dwayne Johnson. So he wanted to be The Rock desperately. And they all called him Buttercup.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it was awesome. That's what call signs do.
Yep.
All right, Heater, I think we've been yapping a long time. We've got a reunion to get to and some refreshments to have. So I'll give you the parting shot if you got any.
I keep thinking we forgot to talk about something, but I don't know what it is. And heck, we could talk about either movie for hours and hours, so there's no sense doing that. No, this is one of my goals. I love your broadcasts, and I'm really happy to be on it and glad to reach more people and be able to thank all the people that helped me and let all the people know that send me these books that I love it. And that it's really... I feel grateful that I can take care of you and do something for you. And so, like you said, you look back at a long, rewarding career, and maybe I'm greedy to want to get back into competitive sports again, but I'm going to try. But I'll always have this in our career and our flying, and I'm very grateful for that.
Just circling back to that real quick, where can people find you? I think you're on Facebook, right?
Facebook, Heatley.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Heater, this has been awesome.
Hey.
Thank you, my man.
Thank you.
I do love you.
I love you more.
All right. We'll see you.
All right. Take care.
Hey, thanks for watching this episode of the Fighter Pilot Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. I still do every episode. Now, as a quick reminder, we try to explain all the jargon, but in case you missed something, head on over to fighterpilotpodcast.com where we have a glossary of all the different terms we use. And while you're there, check out some of the cool merchandise that we offer. For additional content and to help support the show, please go check out our Patreon page. We'll see you next week.